All right, all right. Hello, everyone. We welcome you all to Anabaptist World's live stream. This is the first live stream of the year. So, hi, Jerrell. How are you doing? Before we
Doing well. How you
introduce,
doing?
good man. Before we formally introduce each other, we're here to celebrate and honor Black History Month. For those of you tuning in from different parts of the world, Black History Month is celebrated in the United States, and the story of I know that some other countries are trying to include this month as well. And the story of Black History Month begins in 1915, half a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. My name is Juan Moya, digital strategist of Anabaptist World, and tonight we have Jerrell Williams, pastor of Salem Mennonite in Oregon. We decided to invite Jerrell here today because he is one of our columnists at Anabaptist World, and his columns often invite readers to have a conversation about race. So, Gerald, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to become a pastor, or where are
Yeah,
you? Where are you from originally? Where are you right now?
yeah. Thank you, Juan. I'm from originally from Texas, from a city called Garland, Texas. It's in the Dallas area.
Okay.
So I was raised there. Current moved to Kansas, where I attended Bethel College, which is a Mennonite college out there. Um, Decided to join the Mennonite faith, became fascinated with Anabaptists, got married to a Mennonite, and then eventually went to seminary at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh, PA. And after my 3 years there, wanted to be a pastor, and Salem Mennonite Church felt called to be out here. And so, yeah, I've been with the church now for about 3.5 years.
3.5 years there. Okay. But tell us a little bit of what brought you to become a pastor. What was the specific call for you when you went to seminary,
Mm-hmm.
and then how did you receive this call?
Yeah, no, great question. So the call actually began in high school. In high school,
Mm.
um, all I cared about was religion, theology, and people. Like
Mm.
those were my two kind of interests in life. I like video games and stuff like that, but for the most part, it was people and theology, being in church, um, watching pastors, and so yeah, so I kind of had the call. I knew I wanted to do ministry, but I
Mhm.
didn't know what that looked like. And so at one point, I tried out youth ministry type stuff. One time, I tried to do like the whole like service work type of thing, but really, it just came back to being a pastor of a church. And I remember my first sermon was at Bethel College Mennonite Church in North Newton, Kansas,
Mhm.
and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being being with that congregation. I was an intern there, youth intern there, and so yeah, so it just kind of just gradually led to being a pastor that way. So I've always been into ministry. It's always been something that I felt
Mhm.
led to do, but it took me a while to figure out like, yeah, pastor is the route that I want to go.
So in Salem, the Mennonite Church in Salem, Oregon, is the first church you've officially pastored.
Yeah, so this is
Okay.
the first church I've been a part of. Yep.
And how do you feel?
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. They didn't tell me that 9 months into the job there would be a global pandemic and
Mm.
everything would be shutting down. So, but Salem, the church, has been very flexible, very loving and caring and gracious, and so
Mhm.
it's been really great to see how we've kind of wrestled with this pandemic together as a congregation.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's been a difficult time for with COVID and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and I'm church also in. I'm sure that also in your church, a lot of things must have changed
Yep.
with COVID. How have you guys dealt with communications? Getting people on Zoom calls. How is it working for you guys?
Yeah, so we have an older congregation, and so when we shifted to Zoom, one of the fears was that we would, everyone would disconnect. We wouldn't be able to make it work. Folks would need a lot of help to get onto Zoom, but we were able to make it happen. Everyone was flexible. Everyone was patient. I went to people's houses, setting up
Okay.
laptops and iPads. And so it worked out. And now we're back in person, and we decided to do a hybrid. So now we have, some people come in person, some people are on Zoom. Sometimes they overlap and switch, and
Mhm.
I think it's been a really good adjustment. We've been able to include um, a lot more people within our church. We actually have some folks who listen in from New Zealand, uh,
Wow.
and so being able to connect or broader our connection with people who are either currently attending Salem Mennonite or attended Salem Mennonite in the past. So yeah, so it's been really good to see, and yeah, people have just kind of rolled with it all, and it's been great.
Yeah, interesting because before the pandemic, this wasn't like a normality, that you would
Yeah,
see church being so dynamic with multimedia, with communications, with sharing much content. But right now, it's become like the trend for people to have the option to put their service on an online platform or to go in person.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, Jerrell, you've been a columnist since the beginning of Anabaptist World. I've noticed in your columns that you often take the opportunity to write about race and faith or faith communities. What has been the column you have enjoyed the most writing about this year?
Yeah, yeah. So great question. Yeah, some I love, some I hate. It depends. Some connect with people, some don't as much. But I think one of the ones that I really enjoyed writing was it was about I don't have the title in front of me. Sorry, but about we can't be lukewarm when it comes to racial justice. And so really that one was really deep for me. It was hard for me to write. It was risky for me to write and a little scary because my congregation is predominantly white congregation. Part of it came out of, and they're great people, love
Mhm.
them, but there was some little nervousness when I wrote it,
Right.
and that one in particular came from a place where I was just really angry. I was angry at myself
Mhm.
because when the murder of George Floyd happened,
Right.
um, I led our church in a Sunday school series where we looked at the color of compromise. It was a video series by Jamar Tisby, and we did the video series, and I failed to follow up. Right, I
Yeah, yeah.
failed to follow up with some kind of action, and the conversation kind of died down and went away.
Mhm.
So I was frustrated with myself for letting that happen. I was frustrated with my congregation. I was frustrated, I was just frustrated in general. And
Yeah.
so writing that piece was um, really made me have to wrestle kind of with those emotions, and even it was even speaking to myself of like, I can't take a lukewarm attitude around this, right? I
Right.
have to care about these things.
Mhm.
The church has to care about these things, and we have to make sure that we're still having that conversation and movement and action around racial justice in our country. So
Right, and I think it's also like a constant movement, right? You need
exactly,
to not only do it once, but continuously keep leading people, keep leading ourselves into be more welcoming, integrating different cultures, different backgrounds, different perspectives. So
yeah,
it's definitely a process and a
definitely,
challenge that I think a lot of readers have coming from different backgrounds. I come from Latin American background, so a lot of these stories are also very different for me. Like
yeah,
how if I feel represented with them, if what could be done differently. So I think definitely race and culture is something that we're always gonna be questioning ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and I think down a path to be more welcoming towards others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And well, I didn't ask you, how do you get to Anabaptist World? What was
Yeah.
the connection there?
Yeah, so I started out writing. I actually started writing for the Mennonite
Okay.
magazine with I think at least Sheldon Good was the what was his title? Executive. It wasn't director, but executive editor or something like that
Okay.
was his
Okay.
title.
Mhm.
And I was interning with him, and so I was yeah, I was writing. I was going to different churches, writing about different experiences I was having, which I loved doing, and it was really great. I actually started that way back when I was at Bethel College. I wrote my first article for the Mennonite,
Mhm.
and so yeah, so I just continued to write. And when I heard about the merger happening to Anabaptist World, I was like, so am I out of a job now? Like, am I like am I done? And he was like, well, they'll ask you to be on if they want you on. And so then I got an email or call, and Anabaptist World still wanted me to write, and I was like, sure. And so yeah, so I've been writing with Anabaptist World ever since. Yeah, and it's interesting to think about. Yeah, I've been writing for Anabaptist World since its beginning, and it feels kind of cool.
Nice.
Feels cool.
And now talking about Anabaptist World again, is there a column of yours or otherwise that you are currently thinking about, or something that has struck you, that you remember, that
Yeah,
has been with you for a while?
yeah. There's a recent one I wrote um, about. It was actually, I think it's the last one I wrote about God's faithfulness
Hmm.
to us, and that one came out of um, just pondering, right? Us being faithful to God, right? We always talk about in our churches, we need to be faithful, we need to be faithful, we need to be
Hmm. Hmm.
faithful, but we don't often talk about how God is faithful, right?
Right.
Or those moments where we haven't experienced God's faithfulness. So then where does that leave us, right? You're telling me to be faithful, but I haven't seen God be faithful, right? And so
Right.
um, and a lot of that conversation actually happened on Twitter. Even like I remember having conversations with people on Twitter, folks who really struggled with the concept of God being faithful to them, who had hardships in their lives that they asked God to alleviate, and God didn't come through in the way that they had hoped.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I, as a pastor, right, I'm wrestling with that column in particular because I have church members who may be in that scenario, right?
Hmm.
I have church members who they feel God has delivered them from all their hardships. I have church members who they feel that God is piling on hardships, right? And so
Yeah.
being a pastor and being able to give pastoral care to each person and love each person, and to make our church a space and a place for people to be able to come and ask those tough questions and wrestle with God in community, in the safety of community. That's something that I constantly practice in our church setting, and I ask our church to also practice that. And so yeah, so that was I think about like every day, right? I think about those questions often as I go into conversations with people and be with people in my day to day.
Okay, and that brings me to the next question. That is, since becoming a pastor, um, do you have any reflections on being a black pastor in a predominantly white Mennonite church?
Yeah.
What are your reflections on this? How uh, has there been resistance to change, to accepting maybe a different perspective
Mhm.
towards scripture? What are your reflections so far?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, I think a lot of this work. So one thing that I've had to do um, is just prepare myself mentally, spiritually, emotionally um, to be in a space where mistakes will be made around race, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard to say, and it's hard to stomach sometimes. But the truth of the matter is like, I'm walking into a predominantly white space. Not every, there's going to be conversations around race and culture. And those conversations will not always go my way, right?
Right,
Right.
right.
Those conversations will not always um, go well and great. But what has been key for me as a black pastor is that the congregation has opened up space for me to have those conversations, right? And so that's an important piece, is that people are willing to have these conversations. They're willing to discuss this. They're willing to do the work of reading and learning and educating themselves. And now what we're trying to roll into is the action piece, right? How do we get to the part where we're actually doing something tangible, where we're possibly even sacrificing something for this work, for equity, in specifically in the Salem area, and so that has been some of my reflections of like just the patience, the energy, the grace, right, that you have to have in this work. And in similar ways, my congregation has been gracious to me, because there's been times where um, I haven't handled everything the best way, right? And so they've had to extend grace to me as well in those ways. And so, yeah, just being, having that reciprocal grace for each
Goes back
other.
and forth.
Yeah, exactly. Reciprocal
Mhm.
grace for each other. And yeah, so that's kind of been one of my big reflections as I pastor this congregation.
You say this is your third year?
Going into my fourth year, so it'll be 4 years in June.
Okay,
Yeah.
4 years. And
Yeah.
what are do you have any aspirations, any plans for the church in this year, maybe the coming years?
Yeah.
How do you intend including more people of different backgrounds to your church? Is there some work around that you can share?
Hmm. Yeah. So we've been, it's been a long process, but we've been on a, year and a half. Has it been a year and a half? Maybe just a year. I can't remember how long it's been, but we've been working on this for a while. We've been going through a visioning process
Mhm.
in different phases, and that has been both rewarding and really difficult. It's difficult because it's so long of a process, and we're tackling all these different
Yeah.
structural type of issues and things within the church,
Mhm.
to help the church function better and do um, what it has been called to do, right? And so
Mhm.
discerning what God is calling us to do in this moment and this time. And so I guess my hope is that we'll figure that out, right? That we'll somehow become unified around a vision, around a thought, around a dream, and go forward and make that happen, or work towards making that happen. And we've seen glimpses of that,
Mhm.
right? You know, one of the things that our church has been passionate about is houseless ministry. And so we've partnered with another organization here in Salem, and we've had they are doing the um, bulk of setting up structure and everything like that. And we have volunteers that come through and help to feed the houseless, or collect clothes for the houseless and things like that. And so there's glimpses of these things happening
Mhm.
around the church. And my hope and dream and prayer for our congregation is that um, we figure out right, what God is calling us to, what dream has God given us, what energy has God given us, and
Mhm.
we figure out how to use that in productive ways for not only ourselves but for our larger community.
Right. So, part of the reason why we have you here tonight, well, obviously you've been essential to the writing in Anabaptist World in the columns, but also as we celebrate and we come to an end, right, of Black History Month, this whole month. What has this month looked like for you?
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, what does Black History Month mean to you in
Mhm.
particular?
Yeah, I think the best way to summarize it for me is a quote, actually. And this quote comes from um, the poet Lucille Clifton. And just it's just a small part of a larger poem, but she says, uh, "Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed." And that's how I think of Black History Month, right? It's this month of celebration, and it's an invitation, right, for people to come celebrate, like come celebrate with me that throughout the history of the United States, they have tried to kill Black people, right? Like through
Yeah.
slavery, through segregation, through redlining, right? All these different things, and it has failed,
Mhm.
right? And Black folks have been innovators and creators, and so yeah, come celebrate, right?
Right.
So that's what Black History Month is to me. Is a celebration that something has tried to kill us and has failed, and we can celebrate that together. And that means Black folks, white folks, Latino folks, like everyone, right, can celebrate with the Black community that we are still here, and that we are thriving, and things are, and we are working towards a better future. And so Black
Mhm.
History Month is a constant reminder, a remembrance of those who have gone before us, who have walked, paved the way for us, but also those who are living now and those
Right.
who will come after us, right? And so having all of that in mind, knowing that the work is not done, and continuing that hard work of celebration, of lament, of confession, all these things go into Black History Month for me.
Right, and also I think, Jerrell, it's important to, uh, while also honoring and celebrating, also maybe having a time to call for action against
Yeah.
injustices that happen in
Mm-hmm.
our communities, in our countries. There's really racism in every area that you can think of,
Yeah.
in everywhere. So it's also a call to be constant and not leave it at in this month we're gonna celebrate, no, but to, if we truly want to honor uh, history, diversity, inclusion, like you said, we have to do something about it, right? We have to be
Exactly.
constantly active, constantly learning, constantly standing up against injustices that happen. So yeah, I think that part of the reason why it's important even for me to celebrate Black History Month, even though I'm Latino, but it's because I feel also a connection, because also in our cultures there has been a lot of discrimination,
Yeah.
a lot of struggle, for people to make it on their own, for opportunities to be, for everyone to have somewhat similar opportunities. So I think it's also part of a role as people from, from these cultural backgrounds, uh, that we have the opportunity to be here to speak in public, to actually do something about it, and invite people to also join us in this constant movement, right?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wrote that article about being lukewarm, is because it it feels often that we only care about racial justice when a huge event happens, right? Like the murder of George Floyd
Mhm.
is one example, or like even Black History Month. All of a sudden, everything becomes right. Everyone's like talking about racial justice now, right?
Right, right.
Um, and so what we have to do, and I think what Black History Month reminds us of, is that the work is not done, the work is not finished, and we have to keep going, keep working towards that, and not only look for those big moments or those big events that happen where we have thousands in the streets protesting, but also thinking about the day-to-day ways that we're working towards justice in ourselves, as individuals, as communities, structurally, right? Thinking about how we're moving that forward is a very important component. So just because the calendar turns to March 1st doesn't mean that we're done.
Right. No.
With this conversation and this work that has been started for us.
We're just getting started.
Exactly.
Oh, Jerrell, you mentioned before off screen that you recently became a father.
Yes.
How has this experience changed you? What new perspectives can you bring for people in this change?
Yeah. No, great question. So first of all, let me just say happy birthday. Today is my daughter's birthday, her first birthday. Happy birthday, Orly. I love you. And yeah, yeah, becoming a father has really motivated me to. First of all, I have to do better in a lot of ways, right? Like I'm a very chaotic person. I don't really have many routines in my life. And now, I'm taking care of a child. I have a child who needs routine, right? Needs structure, and so needing to structure myself so that my daughter can have structure has been a very interesting experience. But it's been amazing. It's been great. Just having her, and also thinking about, this is my child. I want to create a better future for her as well, right? And now I'm thinking about school systems and race affecting in different ways that I've always thought about, but now it becomes very real, right? It's at my doorstep because I want my daughter to grow up in a place that is loving and caring, in a world that loves and cares for her as I do. And so, yes, I'm motivated to make that so and try to make that so in our world. And, I want her to, attend a church one day, when she's making her own decisions about faith and she wants to attend church. I want her to attend a place that's going to love her and care for her, right? And and cares about what she cares about and will help her experience the divine in fruitful and productive ways. And so, so it just everything becomes much more real for me as I think about life, think about faith, think about racial justice in our world today.
Yeah, and you're married, Jerrell?
Yes, yep. Been married for 7 years.
7
8 years in May. Yep.
And I saw a picture of you and your wife. Where is she from?
So she is from a small town in Kansas called Gossel, Kansas. Okay. Town of, I think it's 500 people was the population when she was there. So a really small town. Yeah.
And how has because you're black, she's white.
Mm-hmm.
How does race work in this kind of relationships? Mm-hmm. What have you had to get adjusted to? How does she get adjusted to your background? How have you guys? Because there's a clear example of what inclusion, equality means. To be able to love someone who's different from you, learn from them, they learn from you. So what does this look like in your daily life?
Yeah. We've had, we always have those, we always have conversations around race and racial justice. She cares about it just as much as I do. When one example of her that really stuck out to me and really one thing that she did that really touched me was I remember I was a intern with the Franconia Mennonite Conference, which is now called Mosaic Mennonite Conference. And I was interning out there, and so I was living in Philadelphia for a summer while she was living in Pittsburgh for a summer. So we're living apart for this summer. And there was an unarmed black child, Antoine Rose, who was murdered by police. And so I'm in Philadelphia, and there's not much movement happening in Philadelphia around it. Some people who are tuning in may not have even heard the name Antoine Rose because it just wasn't covered as well nationally as some of the other police brutality moments. And so she was in Pittsburgh, and she felt so convicted by this, and she went out and she was protesting. And like, it was kind of one of those things where she was doing this without me beside her, right? Like, I'm all the way in Philadelphia. But it just showed her passion and dedication for racial justice. And so part of that, like part of, loving me, right, was, sacrificing something and going out there and doing the work. And right. And so since then, she's been a part of different racial justice councils, groups, and things like that. And so she has been really, really committed to doing the work, asking questions, educating herself. And she doesn't have it all figured out, and she knows that, but she's continuously trying and doing the work. And now having a daughter who is mixed, thinking about that more in depthly in our own household. And so, I mean, part of loving people, right? Loving your neighbor, your friend, your spouse, right? Is caring about what they care about, caring about their futures, caring about their health and lives, their families' lives. And so that was something that, and we've had many conversations around that. And these different moments that happen. And so it's been, I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy, right? Marriage is never easy, right? But it's been very rewarding and fruitful. And I love her to death, and she's really, really been by my side as we continue to grow together. So
great. So Jerrell, now going back to Anabaptist World, the readers. What are your hopes for the readers of Anabaptist World when reading your experiences and how you live your faith? How do you live your faith?
Yeah.
And what do you want to show people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to show people. I want people to feel the freedom and the challenge, right, to ask those difficult questions, right? To have these conversations, the conversations that the church has said that we shouldn't have, that maybe your churches say, like, these are taboo topics, right? We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about race. We don't talk about blah, blah, blah. Whatever that is, ask those are the things you should be talking about, right? Right. Those are the questions you should be asking. And so I always want to challenge my readers to be asking those questions and to making progress towards those, right? Like I specifically talk to faith communities for a reason, not only because I'm a pastor and things like that, but it's because I love the church. I really do. Like, I love the church, and I will critique it to no end because I want us to live into what God has called the church to be. I want the church to be a place of refuge, of sanctuary, of love for all people, for all of God's creation, but also to be an advocate for change in this world. And so, so I'm hoping that my articles challenge people, ask people to reflect on their own experiences, challenge people to ask those tough questions of their churches, of their church leaders, of themselves, of their families, and eventually translate to doing the work and being out there and just trying to figure that out. And there's not everything's contextual, right? And so there's not a, what works here in Salem may not work in wherever you are.
Florida.
Right? In Florida, right? Like, right, there may not be, or in your small town, right? Because we have a lot of Mennonite churches that are in these small rural communities. And the number one question that they typically ask is, well, how do we get involved when there's not, there's not Black people around us, or there's not these things or organizations around us. There are ways to be involved. You have to be creative, right? God has gifted us, right, with a divine creativity, right?
Yeah, and I
It,
also think it takes a little bit more work, but it's worth it because
exactly.
that's the way you make bridges, that you connect people, that you develop relationships.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I think people shouldn't be afraid of. No, they don't. No, I'm not gonna talk to them because they don't speak my language.
Mm,
I'm not gonna go there because it's different than what I'm used to. Like
mm,
put in a little bit more of work, and it's gonna be so much rewarding
mm.
in the end, I think.
Exactly, exactly. And be on the right side of history.
Hmm.
Like when people talk about you and your church 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what are they going to say? Like, that is something to, like, that's something I always consider. What are people going to say about Salem Mennonite Church here in the community? What are community people saying? How are we visible? How are we um, been pillars within this community? Do people trust us?
Right.
Do we trust us?
Hmm.
Right. So all these conversations, I want churches to be having, churches, individuals, families, groups, whatever. I want people to be having these conversations and not to be afraid to ask the tough questions and then go out and do the work and try to figure this stuff out together.
Is there a coming column for you next month that you already have some ideas about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I'm working on a couple of ideas. None that I feel comfortable saying.
In public.
Yeah, for a surprise. But I will say one thing that has been meaningful has been how many people have, I've had a lot of people email me, after reading, like, do the work of like finding my church online, first of all,
Right.
and then emailing me and like telling me how much they appreciated something that I've written. And and that's always a sign for me to keep writing, right? To keep
Right.
um,
Mhm.
keep using that avenue to communicate with people. And so yeah, so I think I'll always be writing about racial justice and the church. But like my thing is always kind of integrating, thinking about culture and faith, and integrating current events within my writing. That's something I always want to do, or try to do and try to accomplish. So yeah, I'm working on a few things, but nothing that is for sure going to be out there.
Okay.
But they'll always challenge somebody.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
my hope.
There's always gonna be resistance. That's part
Yeah,
of the work. But at
yeah,
least with resistance, there's also room for change
exactly.
and to shake people up
Yep,
a little bit. Well,
yep.
Gerald, thank you so much. Once again, we are so happy to have you in Anabaptist World. I'm sure you're doing a great job in Oregon. If whenever I go visit there at some point in the future, I'm gonna be sure of stopping by and saying hello to you.
Yeah, for sure. Come
Um,
on through.
but also, I want to remind all the viewers right now, the people connected, that you can check out Jerrell's columns and anabaptistworld.org. So there's a bunch of stuff that he's written that is very good, and especially now thinking of racial justice, equality. Definitely go and give it a read because it's. I think reading is a good way to challenge yourself, right? To challenge your own ideas. um, so yeah, thank you for being with us here today, Jerrell. We will continue to build bridges that bring us together and allow us to share a common space for our human values and faith.
Yeah.
Is there something you wanna say before we leave?
Yeah, just thank you to you, Juan. Thank you, Anabaptist World, for the opportunities that y'all have given me. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, everyone who reads my work. I really appreciate it. And yeah, keep Keep doing the good work. Keep doing good work. Keep learning. Keep educating. Keep asking questions. Let's keep moving. Let's keep moving.
All right, Jerrell, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, rest of your day, and take care. And congratulations on your newborn and the first birthday.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Hope you celebrate.
Yep. We have some cake. We got some cake.
All right, great. All right, Jerrell, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye bye.